We hope you and your family are enjoying back to school season. Visit queenslibrary.org to see all of our back to school programs and giveaways, and to read our back to school guide with helpful information about family communication, college readiness, and other topics related to health, happiness, and success during the upcoming school year. Every year, Hispanic Heritage Month celebrates the achievements of Hispanic Americans, the contributions of Hispanic people to our country, and the fact that there is no American culture without Hispanic culture. Join us for our virtual and in-person programs and enjoy our special book lists for all ages. Visit queenslibrary.org to learn more. It's Library Card Sign-Up Month. A Queens Public Library card is your passport to more than 5.5 million books, movies, and other media, over 40,000 classes and events per year, more than 5,000 computer workstations all across Queens, and so much more. Discover everything that's free with a library card. Visit our website or your local library to apply for your QPL card.
Welcome to Queens Public Library's Talk with Kashiar Kabushani, author of the novel I Will Greet the Sun Again. The New York Times states a heartbreaking debut. Kabushani writes movingly about Kay's queer coming of age and his burgeoning identity as a writer. It provides meaningful historical context for the pain passed down through these generations. Publishers Weekly declares, beautiful. This heartrending tale will stay with readers. From Javier Zamora, author of Solito, a story for us brown kids who grew up in apartment complexes making our own breakfast, lunch, and dinner because our immigrant parents were away at work. Kabushani's voice is a revelation. He has written a novel that shows what it means to grow up into a beautiful young man. The San Francisco Chronicle writes, haunting and poetic. Hi, I'm Brian Alessandro, greeting you tonight from Washington, D.C. I have written for Interview Magazine, Newsday, Pink, Huffington Post, Lambda Literary, The Gay and Lesbian Review, and have recently co-adapted Edmund White's A Boy's Own Story into a graphic novel for Top Shelf Productions. Additionally, I co-edited Fever Spores, The Queer Reclamation of William S. Burroughs, an anthology of essays and interviews about Burroughs for Rebel Satori Press. I'm also the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the literary journal, The New Engagement. My first novel, The Unmentionable Mon, was published in 2015 by Cairn Press, and my first feature film, Afghan Hound, was produced by Marrier Media in 2011. It is currently streaming on Plex, Tubi, and Amazon. My new novel, Performer Non Grata, was released in April by Rebel Satori Press. Culture Connection, curated by Daniel Zaleski and now in its 10th year at the Queens Public Library, is proud to present international artists from emerging talent to award-winning masters. These disciplines include music, theater, author talks, and film. Now expanding into a virtual format, Culture Connection is currently reaching a global audience. Kashiar Kabushani was born in Van Nuys, California in 1992. During his childhood, he spent time in Iran before returning to Los Angeles. He studied philosophy at California State University, Northridge, and prior to completing his MFA at Columbia University, he worked as a middle school teacher. This is his first novel. Thank you for joining us, Kash.
Thank you, Brian, for having me. And I loved listening through to your bio, and
Oh,
makes me
thank
want to
you.
both like find the articles you've written to read, the novel and the novels, I should say, and the film.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
so
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
lucky to be in
Um,
conversation with you.
well, yeah, we feel privileged to have you tonight. Thank you. So, for viewers who have not yet read your novel, please, if you could summarize the story.
Yeah, a coming of age story that takes place partly in a queer coming of age story that takes place in Los Angeles and partly also in Iran, and it centers around the protagonist who goes by Kay.
Mhm.
He's got two older brothers, and it's especially towards the second half of the book being raised by a single mom, um, Iranian American family, Muslim,
Mhm.
and I think when I was working on it and as I look at it now, I really wanted to show, yeah, several parts what it means to have those identities, and not just those specific identities, but what does it mean to be a young, sensitive person growing up in mid late 90s, early 2000s, playing basketball, meeting neighbors, possibly falling in love, being at times making not very great decisions, but still like reaching for love, reaching for
Sure,
connection.
sure.
And so that's sort of the way I describe the novel. Is I look at this young person reaching and searching while contending with different things of, well, yeah, Islamic identity, Iranian identity, all those things that I had previously mentioned.
And a universal story certainly coming of age is, right, but also there's the specificity of Kay's experiences and background and struggles that also gives it layers in its richness.
Mm.
And it is beautiful and it is tender. Please tell us about your protagonist Kay. He seems perhaps a bit adrift, maybe without a sense of belonging, and then also, if you wouldn't mind, how close is he and his experiences fashioned after you and your experiences?
I'll start with this with the second part. I think part of the joy in writing a novel, because I got my MFA in nonfiction, and so when I first moved
Mm,
to New York and was studying at Columbia and working with the nonfiction faculty, my intention and the hope was to write a memoir about
mm,
about my experiences. And then as I was in that process, I more and more started to hear this narrator's voice and him wanting to explain certain things or go to certain places that in my own life I hadn't experienced. Therefore, kind of eliminating the possibility of nonfiction if I'm now using imagination. Um, and so there, of course, are the overlaps of the Iranian identity, Muslim, or being from Los Angeles, being queer.
mhm,
Uh, but at the same time, Kay in the novel, so bold and um, expressive, and also like trying to trying to find beauty in even the really hard and devastating things that happen.
mm,
That definitely wasn't the case for me. Like at times, yeah, growing up, like I would, try to make sense of things in a positive and meaningful way,
mhm,
be there for friends and family and all those things. But I feel that for Kay's character, his compass seems to be much more fine tuned towards um, a goodness, but also b finding a way to kind of move through and move beyond the
mm,
circumstances.
mm.
Wasn't
You
the
said,
case for me.
I was like, you said something really key that resonates with me also as a writer. Every time I try to write a memoir, it always ends up becoming a novel that is maybe somewhat like autofiction, where it has facets of me and my experiences, but there's
So what's the
something.
pivot for you, do you think, when you look at it? Like where do you go from memoir to novel?
I think I just so much love invention. I love creating
Mm,
things, and memoir, it feels very journalistic where you have to really abide by the facts. And
yeah.
I want to create something, so I'm always pulled away from it, and it never becomes the memoir. It always becomes a novel that has something about me disguised, embedded within it. Um, but that's a very interesting point that you can start with yourself and then go elsewhere with it when you're writing fiction. There's a freedom uh, in it.
Yeah, and like perhaps even reimagine, as you said, like if it starts off as a personal experience, like so for instance in the novel, like whether it's the event of 9/11 happening, or it's um, first love encounter, or being taken to Iran and then returning, like these are all things that um, I certainly I experienced
Mhm.
in a journalistic nonfiction way, so to speak.
Sure.
But then to like both write some of, try to like convey the truthfulness of those experiences, but then
Yes.
also imagining what it would have been like had certain factors not happened, and being able to bring that.
Yeah, you said something really interesting just now, and it's this idea that maybe in writing fiction you get to a deeper, possibly a deeper emotional truth than the facts, and that's what fiction allows ultimately. That's an insight that maybe I hadn't considered until just now. Maybe that's why I'm pulled in that direction, much like you were in this case with this book.
Yeah, not yeah, maybe it's not a dichotomy, but I find that in fiction you can, I don't know, I think of like the worst parts of people and the
Mm,
best parts of people, or just the worst parts, the best parts of this experience, and getting to um, have those interact and imagine a different outcome. Like especially, even in, in Los Angeles, and in my experience in the 90s and early 2000s, like very much uh, there was definitely, it was rife with homophobia
mm,
and things that were incredibly harmful and hurtful, and especially within, if you were a part of an insular community where those things were able to be, they were, it was kind of part of the norm because it was, you were blocked out from like any kind of outside, like, hey, this is this is probably not a good idea to
mm,
operate in this way.
mm,
And in the novel, like getting to, not that there's not a presence of that, but getting to protect Kay and Johnny and the other characters
sure,
from
sure,
that,
sure, sure.
which like
Interesting.
in one, the example of homophobia or racism, like those are the kind of worst parts of our, our humanity, so to speak.
Yeah,
And I didn't want to dismiss the reality of that, but also like find a, maybe a in between space within those.
makes sense. Um, you write quite honestly and clearly about identity formation and also alienation, especially during childhood and adolescence. In writing your novel, did you learn anything new about these subjects, or maybe view them in a different way after examining them so closely?
Wow, it's such a beautiful question, and my like guttural response is like absolutely. And so there's kind of like a laundry list of
Mm,
what I discovered about myself, and I think in writing this novel, yeah, it even gets me emotional because I spent so much of my life closeted, and when I say that, I mean that both like in regards to queerness, but also um, with my Iranian identity, my identity as a Muslim, to the point where um, after 9/11 uh, had legally changed my name, had asked my mom to go with me to court when I was, I believe, a freshman, or yeah,
oh,
freshman
wow.
in high school, um, and then writing this book, and even deciding to, even though he goes by K, but that's like, that's even a much uh, back to your question about the differences and the similarities, like even him willing to say, okay, I don't want to go by my full name, but I'm not going to go as to so far as to like invent a new name. Not that severing one's name isn't violent and
Mm,
heartbreaking,
mm,
but writing this and learning about the narrator gave me the chance to be like, you know what, I want to go by Kashayar, or I want to go by Kash, or I want to go by K, some gesture towards um, who I was born as.
mm,
And then the last thing I'll say is, when you make that gesture towards reclamation of name or sexual orientation or identity or philosophical identity, like whatever it may be, you then have to contend with um, why it is in the first place you didn't feel safe or
mm,
comfortable to do
mhm,
that. I
mhm.
just said I was good. That was gonna be the last thing I'll say.
No,
But
no, keep going. It's
one
fine.
more
Yeah.
example is like, once I've been sober for over 5 years now, and one of the things that I was just talking to another fellow about this, of like the big challenge of getting sober is then you look back and have to contend with the wreckage, like the guilt or the
Wow.
shame or the disappointment of decisions that were made, and what that's meant to other people and what's that meant to your present day life. And I bring that example up because I think, going back to your initial question of what I learned, it was both this like invigorating and beautiful experience, but it also comes with years of, oh my gosh, like I this became a novel, and took its shape and form when I was 26, 27. So imagine years of living a certain way, being a certain way. It compounds, and you got to look at it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's on some level, it really is a gift and a privilege to be able to process this sort of thing through the lens of a book. If one could
Mm,
produce a book,
mm.
I find it therapeutic. I don't know if you do, and it's a sort of
Life
exercise,
saving,
life
right?
saving. Yeah, I do. I feel that way too. I also came out quite late, and and I can relate very much to what you're saying on so many of those levels. I was really interested in Kay's relationship with his brothers and how his attraction to men upsets his concept, maybe, of that relationship or of those relationships. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I read through the book or think about the book, and I it's like any setting they're in, whether it's in Isfahan or
Mhm.
at one point Kay is taken to visit his mom's college campus, or of course when he's with the boys in the apartment complex, he seems really insistent to announce and to focus in on, um, not just his attraction to men, but like the details or like the things that he's attracted to about these men that
Yeah.
he encounters, whether it's in passing or whether it's an intimate relationship. And I bring that up because I think, yeah, being with two older brothers,
Mhm.
and as far as he understands them and as far as they present themselves, like, conventionally straight two older brothers, and there's I within that there isn't going to be a lot of conversation about same-sex attraction or
Mhm.
what that means, and so I think Kay turns to them for comfort and camaraderie, as siblings at times will, um, especially with his eldest brother Sean. There's definitely a significant connection with basketball, and then with Justin,
Mhm.
there's a significant connection about work and love. So like Kay sort of gleans what he can and learns what he can and what he can, and then as far as this attraction he feels for men, that sort of happens outside of the world of their life,
It's
or is happening internally.
Yeah, and he almost doesn't really completely understand his desires yet too. Like when he starts to fantasize about Johnny, his friend, there seems to be he certainly knows that he's attracted to him, but there seems to be some ambiguity or conflict or confusion happening within him. Am I
Yeah, I'm
right to
so
say
glad
that?
you mentioned it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
so glad you mentioned that
yeah.
because I have a really hard time. Oh, I shouldn't say hard time, but I'm also, I feel compelled, and um, it's very compelling to me as he's trying to understand it, because I think there's a lot, and a lot of people he's in this world that he's coming across and that he feels drawn to. Like early on, there's even the way he describes, like in the brief encounter he has with Johnny's mom, with Cynthia, when she opens up the apartment door. Like there's just this hunger, I think,
Mhm,
for
mhm.
connection, and as you said, that takes one way that takes form is his attraction to Johnny or other
Mhm.
men. But yeah, I it's been helpful to see in my mind like the fluidity of how we understand queerness in the in
Yeah,
the in the literal sense of it,
yeah.
of this young person, like not quite sure where or how he belongs, and to whom,
Mhm.
um, but that he's willing to express those desires and perhaps pursue them.
It feels very like clinically astute. Like I feel like you really understand. you get into the phenomenology of Kay so well in those moments that you really almost feel like a psychologist at work. And my background is in clinical psychology, so I really do appreciate that kind of writing very much. Can you please talk a little bit about the title of the novel? I know it comes from a line in the poem by the Iranian poet and filmmaker Farooq Farooqazad, who made one of my favorite short films, The House is Black, and the focus on the sun.
Isn't it just stunning?
And I'm obsessed with that film. And the focus on the sun in several scenes throughout, too. Can you talk a little bit about the title and maybe?
Yeah, so yeah, it comes from it's actually one of her title poems, and I mean I'll just get super specific. You know, the I will greet the sun again. When my editor, we both are, yeah, absolute. Um, it goes beyond just like being a fan of Farouk's work. It seems like we feel in conversation with her and have felt in conversation with her, and so there was the hope that Farouk would lend us a title for the novel, which we ultimately landed on what felt like the right title, and you know, as you said, the presence of the sun in not just Los Angeles, but the San Fernando Valley, like scorching, dry heat, and then similarly in Esfahan, and the boys spend a lot of time in the sun, and so there's the cultural, and also for Farooq Farrokhzad to have announced I will greet the sun again in the face of misogyny and hardship, and for that feminist energy and power, or I mean, yeah, feminist, but just like I think also just power, period.
Powerful,
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just human spirit. And there is also to me the people in this novel, the characters that ultimately give Kay a chance to survive are the women, whether it's his Khala in Iran or his mom, who certainly isn't able to meet all of his needs, but provides some kind of strength and an example of like what it means to keep working and to do it in as honest of a way as possible. And so the title itself, I Will Greet the Sun Again, feels very hopeful. And then the fact that it came from Farouk, I think was doubly meaningful.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect.
Because I'll just say one last thing, like
Sure.
I love posts like W.S. Merwin, and for a minute, I mean, I have his collected poems, and he's one of many. You know, there's so many poets that I revere and I love, but there was something specific about Farouk that I was like, I think she's who we need to lean on here.
I think it was a really wise choice. And it works beautifully. I want to shift gears for a second and talk about Baba, Kay's father. Their relationship. Please talk to us about their relationship and how Kay's budding homosexuality affects his perception of it, and might harm it. This very fragile relationship that he's. Well, I don't want to ruin anything, but yeah, talk a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, I'll start from the top. So he is, yeah, Bubba is Kay's father, and as I imagine most or many, or if not all, young children hope and look to their father for a sense of comfort and perhaps strength and guidance, admiration. I think for Kay, there's a sense, especially with Bubba's playfulness, his love for the ocean, them going, whether going to the mosque together, different conversations that Bubba, or different insights that he offers about what it means to be a person in America, what it means to work towards adulthood, and then there is also this like really complicated past that Bubba has, which is like kind of told through narrative, and it almost like has this lore effect. Not quite sure what's fact, what's fiction when Bubba is explaining to Kay or to his brothers like his job as an engineer, or when he first emigrated to the States from Iran. And there's like brief mention about the hostage crisis that happened, and in Tehran. So there are these like really complicated factors that play into this, and then again in the day to day on the surface, there's just this like deep longing for closeness to his father, and then a series of events when the boys are taken, and then something really tragic and devastating that happens in Iran. To your question about how that affects
Yeah.
Kay's sexuality, I think it makes it that much more complicated and difficult um, to really come into himself. Although I, it was really important to me to show that even though there's violations and boundaries are crossed in such a harmful and perhaps brutal way, Kay is still willing to be like, I feel this way about Johnny, and I still want to pursue this, even
Yeah.
if because he's so young,
Right.
that it's,
Right.
as you said, like we don't. It isn't until later on in life, perhaps, that we have the chance to look back and process and make meaning of some of the things that happen.
Yes. Yeah. So Baba becomes pretty disturbed by how America has corrupted his wife, Kay's mother, and brings the family back to Iran as a result. I was especially struck by the scene in which she allows her sons to watch Basic Instinct with her, which I thought was an amazing scene, and explains how such a film would never be shown in Iran due to the
Yeah.
nudity and sex. Please discuss Kay's mother and how does Kay view her?
Yeah, well, you just hit the nail. Like maybe she's having her coming of age
Mm,
as a young person, as a woman in America, and not to say that it's appropriate to watch Basic Instinct with your children, but I wanted to write that to show that she is opening herself to whatever the culture or the media at the time is available to her, and whatever forms of entertainment, whatever opportunities to um, explore things that she otherwise wouldn't get to explore in Iran, and then to do it in, with her children, because she works, she goes to school, so the opportunity for spending time with her kids is very rare, and or is very limited,
mhm.
um, and so yeah, there are a million other things that she could have chose to put
it's a
on. Um,
it's a great scene. It was a really fantastic scene. I think I reread it. I've read it twice because I loved what you did. I always admire when writers can sort of pull from pop culture and then add a layer of depth that
mm,
maybe, in the past 30 years, that Basic Instinct has been in existence that we might not have considered through the eyes of a woman such as Kay's mother. I thought that was a really like dynamic moment. Um, there's that scene that you alluded to earlier with Babu and Kay that is really shocking
mm.
and kind of horrifying, but you handled it with great sensitivity and care. How did you approach it? How
Oof.
did it, was it, yeah, without giving away what it is, obviously, or talking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, by all means, but um, can you just generally kind of tell us what your process was in writing about something so difficult and sensitive?
Yeah, I think wanted to, in the same way, I guess like with other experiences that Kay encounters, I wanted to be very sensitive and truthful and honest about this particular experience with his father, the violation of it, what it what that experience felt like, and again, because he's so young, um, the the impossible thing, or at least I felt the impossible thing, was for him to really grapple with, um, like not that not that there's any, it felt impossible to grapple with like how to make how to understand this thing that
Mhm.
has happened, um, but what felt important and possible for me as a writer, you asked how I approach it. It was like, well, I want to show somebody who goes through this what it again, the kind of the the feelings of it in the moment and what that's like, because it's something that he's not only contending with in that moment, but something he's going to have to contend with for the rest of his life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the resilience and the innocence and the beauty of this character is such that he still has the capacity to feel his sympathy for his dad, but then also desire for Johnny. That it hasn't stopped him from feeling those two things for those two people, which is
That latter part was really, yeah, I know I mentioned that earlier, but that was like
yeah.
super important to me,
Mhm.
to show that he is uh, trying to gesture towards separating the experience he had with his father, versus what he's experiencing with another boy, with Johnny.
Um, Maman's sister, the aunt of Kay and his brothers, Kelly, sends Kay and his brothers back to their mother in California at a certain point after they've been in Iran with their dad. Please talk about her motives, her concerns, and what she risks in doing this.
Yeah, I think she sees, I mean, in a way of the way you've generously described Kay, I think she, first and foremost, being their aunt, is coming from a place of yeah, familiar, like these are my nephews.
Mhm.
I care for them. I want them to be okay. They're away from their mom. They're in Iran, and so there's that aspect of it, and then I think beyond that, she also recognizes, um, just how great the need is to be, um, out of their father's sort of authoritarian, destructive control. Earlier, the scene that we were talking about, or the experience that Kay has with his father, his aunt, Khaled, Maman's sister, she shows up the next day, and it both feels, you know, heroic and also like, wish she could have come one day or one week sooner, for the boys. But I think she recognizes, it's interesting, Brian. It's like, I think, of course, she as a woman living in Iran, she's definitely, being oppressed by that system. And then even when that's refined, I think she recognizes that on a smaller scale, these boys are being oppressed by their father's decision making. So she's certainly no stranger to it, and what she risks is her life,
Yeah,
by
yeah.
going against the word of a man in Iran, sort of contriving and strategizing ways, using her own resources
Mm.
and connections to get the boys back to their mom without, um, without going through, the boy's father. So she, but I think, again, I think she picks up on the urgency, especially when, she and Kay get to spend time together, and she sees just how perilous it is, for them to be in Iran.
No. Kash, would you please read a section of "I Will Greet the Sun" again for us?
Yeah, gonna read a few pages, and this is from the opening, of the novel.
Great.
Maman joins us outside in our building's small picnic area. She has everything prepared: sliced onions and tomatoes, raw chicken shining bright gold with turmeric and oil. She wears her long black blouse and a scarf tied loosely around her hair. She fans the charcoal with a piece of cardboard, trying to get the coals to come to life. She asks Sean to pick up the trash and whatever is left on the ground around us, which he does. Paper plates with spots of ketchup and used napkins from whoever was here before. For you, Bobo says, handing me my birthday present as my brothers look on. A golden paper crown from Burger King. Boa knows it's my favorite. He tells me to stand in front of the grill, Says he wants a picture for Iran, for them to see just how handsome his youngest boy is. Sean sits on the old splintery bench to watch, telling me how stupid I look as Bubba tells me where to place my arms. Justin's already wandered off collecting dandelions that grow along the concrete path winding through our building. He likes bringing the ones that haven't yet died into our room, placing them by the window in the vase Mom let him have. Something nice to look at, he says. Our version of a hotel room. Bubba continues snapping, then scrolling the wheel on his camera, taking more pictures. When he finishes, he sets the camera aside and tells me to come to him. He grabs my shoulders and squeezes the muscles in my arms. Your brother's becoming so strong, he tells Sean. Then Bubba leans in close, his bushy mustache tickling my cheek as he whispers into my ear, a secret for only us to know, that I'm his favorite. He says my name loud and long, as if he wants everyone in the building to hear. His youngest son, named after a Persian king, our very first and the very best, though I haven't felt any of that, not powerful or important in the way a king is supposed to feel. Instead, each time Bubba says my name, it makes me want to disappear, so embarrassed, wanting to turn my back to whoever can hear. I hate the way my name sounds so foreign and old, which is why nobody but Bubba uses my real name, not me, not Johnny or Christian, and not even the adults at school who stutter whenever they see it on the roll sheet. I tell them all to call me Kay, because unlike Bubba and Mama, I was born right here, and like my brothers, I want to be known as a boy from LA, since that's the truth. Like Christian and Johnny, like my friends at school, and eventually I'll even have tattoos of my own. I'll wear a Dodgers jersey and sunglasses everywhere I go. I'll drink every kind of beer. I asked Sean, even though I already know the answer, why him and Justin got American names, and not me. While you were in Mamon's belly, Sean says, grinning, Bubba had this dream that you'd grow up to be Iran's next Shah. My brother thinks it's hilarious. Bubba checks on the onions and tomatoes on the grill, turning them over, yelling for Justin to come back. Sean stands behind her dad and makes faces, and Justin tries not to laugh. Momon tells me I should go and invite our neighbors. This entire time, I've been watching from the corner of my eye, hoping Johnny doesn't come out to hang out on the steps like he usually does. He'd see how strict Bubba is with us and how serious he dresses, as if in this very moment we're on our way to the mosque for namaz. Johnny would see how different me and my brothers are, even though we act the same. Momon wearing a headscarf, Bubba talking in Farsi, seeming more like a grandfather than a dad. He acts proud of it, too, as if being almost 20 years older than Momon is something to show off. They aren't home, I tell Momon. One by one, Bubba removes the pieces of barbecue chicken from the grill. He places them over the long sheet of sesame flatbread, letting the noon sangak absorb the juice dripping from the boneless chicken thighs. What about the friends you're always going out to play with? Mama continues. You mean Christian? Sean asks. Ale, Mama nods. But the other one, too. That's Johnny, Sean reminds her. Ask them. Velish Cohen, Bubba says, interrupting. We don't have time, he tells Momon. Bubba tells us to follow him to the parking lot, says we can finish eating in the car. With plastic plates in our hands, we begin to leave, but that's when I see him, sitting on the staircase. Johnny's wearing his fitted Dodgers cap, brim pulled low down to his eyebrows. His legs are open and wide, his arms resting at their elbows on his knees, palms down as if they're too big for his wrists to carry. He nods my way, the tiniest smile on his mouth. If it were nighttime, his mom gone to work, he'd have a stolen Marlboro and would be taking long drags while watching the blue-black sky that gives us a few scattered stars if we're lucky. But for now, Johnny sits there staring into nothing, copying the way we've seen the gangbangers in our neighborhood sitting on the curb outside of Lanark Park. Spines curved, bodies hunched forward with their heads slowly swiveling left to right, looking. Johnny does the same. Waits for the valley's still and hot summer day to give him something, anything. Thank you.
Really beautiful, Kash. Thank you. So, Kay's brother Sean excels at basketball, and you write really dynamically, even corporeally, what it's like to play as the sport of basketball so vigorously and well. How does basketball figure into the story, maybe thematically? You also, and then also a second question is, you also grew up playing basketball. Is that right?
Yeah. I grew up playing ball. Yeah, thematically, a way out, I think.
Mm,
Not just from the apartment complex, not just from tensions that are happening in the house or stressors that are happening in the boys' life, in the boys' lives. But I think especially for Sean, sees it as a way out to perhaps college, or playing college ball, or
Mhm.
hopefully and perhaps going beyond that. And so it's this combination of both in the immediate present, offering an outlet, a place to be, a place of belonging. Especially Sean is able to meet other people who kind of take on not only friendship roles, but like almost
Mm.
mentor roles.
Yeah.
So there's that in the immediate moment, and then thematically, it's kind of like, is this something that's going to save the boys?
Mm. Sean's relationship with his mother is tender, but also pretty fraught. She often misses like very key moments in his childhood, like graduation from 8th grade, because she must work. Can you say more about their relationship?
Between Kay and his mom, or Sean and his mom?
Between Sean and his mom.
Between Sean and his mom. Yeah, the eldest brother. So I think the way I look at it with like all three of them,
Yeah.
I think she wants to be present, is able to be like loving and caring, but whether it's graduations, or at one point Justin's having a really hard time dealing with breakup, emotionally, in the way that one would hope from a parental figure, whether it's mother or father, or caregiver, uh, it doesn't have the capacity for it. So that's to your point of like it being fraught. I think I agree with that.
Hmm. Shifting from motherhood to fatherhood, your novel also meditates on the notion of fatherhood. And we spoke earlier about how Kay's father is perhaps abusive, and then Johnny's has a whole other secret family and is kind of
Mm.
negligent. What do you think? Maybe I don't want to say that. I don't want to ask what are you saying, but what are you maybe exploring about fathers and their relationships to their sons?
That's a great question. I think I often, while I was writing it, I think I saw it, and maybe you had even phrased this way, but I saw it from the other way around, where these fathers
Mm,
are, to me, they feel unknowable, and yeah, they have these, like, whether it's secret families or complicated pasts, or they aren't truthful in their day to day. And so there's that presence in those characters, whether it's Johnny's father, or the boys, or Kay's. Um, but I think when you ask like, what am I trying to say? I think I wanted to show um, the impact that has on young boys,
mm,
and the result of it, what they're left to contend with, and and so it, again, maybe this is the same thing to say, having something be a meditation of fatherhood is the same thing as having meditation be of what it means to be a son. But I
mm.
think with the latter is where like I felt more drawn to explore, because quite frankly, it's the idea of fatherhood, of being a father, and particularly the ones in this book. A whole novel could be written
Oh
about that
yeah,
alone, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
But I
Yeah.
certainly did have an interest in a desire, especially towards the end. Johnny and Kay are able to some degree, talk um, about their dads, and to be expressive about the impact, the way their fathers have been, what that's meant to them.
Hmm. You spoke a little bit earlier about 9/11 being perhaps one of the events in the book early on, and I will greet the sun again. Does look candidly at what it's like to be a Muslim in the beginning of the 21st century after 9/11 in the United States. The bigotry, of course, was horrifying and reached terrifying levels. Um,
Yeah.
what does the book say about this period, or can you speak a little bit about what you're examining here?
About the what is the books about the early 2000s, about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that moment. those years. Really, it's more than just a moment.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, something that and certainly Muslim Americans aren't weren't and aren't alone in this.
Mhm.
But to have had a community, to have had something that's really important, whether it's a religious practice that's observed at home privately or outwardly in community with the mosque, to have that taken,
Mm.
jeopardized, and harmed. Um, and then also, I also wanted to, especially for Kay, I think a big the shock of it is like the how quickly um, and again the consequences and the it was drawn out and arguably to this very day, not arguably, we are still contending with it.
Mhm.
Um, and, you know, especially in what I read earlier about Kay being so convicted that he's a American boy from Los Angeles, there isn't really much description in that sort of monologue, if you will, about him being Muslim and what that means. And so here's this young person that's like, this is who I want to be, or this is who I am, while ignoring or uh, not quite coming to terms with these other identities that he has that eventually he comes to value and cherish about himself. But for a young person in particular to not quite have full awareness about, let's say, being uh, or full integration and like self consciousness, I should say, around being Muslim when it's just part of day to day life. And then from a societal standpoint, for that to all of a sudden become this glaring thing,
Mm.
the shock of that, I think I
Mm.
really wanted to convey. That was one of the aspects that I wanted to convey.
Yeah, I mean, you did it very pointedly, very humanely, and thoughtfully. We're going to be taking questions for Kash in a few moments, so please do start sending them in. And I still have two questions left of my own. There's something really bittersweet about watching Kay and Johnny and Kay's brothers growing up and even joining gangs or the military. They're finding their places in the world and making their way despite the dangers of these choices. Can you speak a little bit about this?
Family, right, Brian? Like,
Family, yeah, belonging, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I think, you know, my hope and my wish for any young person is, as you said, is to find a family that is nurturing and not harmful or not
Mm.
potentially harmful and destructive. But I mean, certainly in my own life, I've seen the instinct and the decision to reach towards things that like chosen family that perhaps ultimately doesn't serve me. And I think that's the case for Johnny and Justin. I think they have found a family that is willing to accept them, even as fraught as it may be. Like particularly as you know, for Justin being Iranian American, like joining the military, and even Kay questions what that's gonna look like for him and
Mm.
the potential harm from that. And then of course with Johnny, you know, joining a gang, you
Yeah.
know, there's the acceptance and the community of it, but there's also like a great deal of potential harm that can come from that.
Uh, in the end, Kay leaves California for New York, similar to his father's years earlier when he first came to America from Iran. Can you say more about the significance of this movement, the
I
parallels,
think,
maybe?
yeah, yeah. There's a point where or a moment where even Kay is able to see a picture of his father from the 70s in New York City, and I think for Kay having any kind of context on that kind of scale, like New York comes with its own narrative, right? Like it has so much context baked into the place and
Sure.
historically, and um, not to say that Los Angeles doesn't have that, but I just feel like the kind of scale that New York provides that, and then the fact that his father was also there, I think he saw it as a place that, similar to what Johnny and Justin choose, that he could see it as a place of, okay, maybe this is where I can find
Mm.
family and purpose, particularly because it's this already established place with so much narrative,
Mm.
that I see him being like, okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna latch myself onto whatever it may be given. It's certainly going to be something different from experiences in the valley. Let me move towards that.
Yeah, too. And what I got too from it was, he grew up in the valley, and then also his family comes from Iran. So New York could be the place that he can call his own, that he can make his own. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a few questions coming in. Congratulations on your new novel. I really enjoyed it. Would you like to comment on the current rash of book bans in the USA? it's that could be a whole book in and of itself, right? The amount of what we could say about it.
Yeah, and I'm as I listen to you ask the question, I'm also looking at it on the screen here, and even just seeing book bans in the
Yeah.
USA, like it, uh, my comments on that, fucking tragic
Yeah.
and dangerous,
Mhm.
and uh, particularly they are often books from persons of minority groups or
Yeah.
oppressed groups who are telling these
Yep.
beautiful, important stories.
Yes.
And if we are, it's like it's the slideshow at the beginning of this presentation. American culture. There is no American culture without Hispanic culture.
Right.
There is no USA without language and literature, right? So
Mhm.
like I hope that thoroughly answers
Wow.
it.
That's good. Very thoughtful. Which books and writers have had the biggest impact on your life? Which would you like to teach the people coming of age? What would you like to teach the people coming of age, excuse me, today?
Writers have had the biggest. Which books and writers have had the biggest impact on your life? James Baldwin, Farouk Farrokhzad, as I mentioned, David Wojnarowicz. Um, I mean, I can go on and on. Gwendolyn Brooks, W.S. Merwin, I mentioned,
Mhm.
Sandra Cisneros.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, what would you like to teach the people coming of age today? Um, a way to express what's really happening on the inside,
Mm.
and to find and to be able to, whether it's through language or film or through painting, like or any genre, any field, but the importance of like connecting with that and then sharing it, is what I would like to teach.
And you did teach young children for a while, right? For a few years, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
If your novel was adapted to film, who would you like to
Ah,
direct?
Barry Jenkins.
Barry J. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Moonlight. That was easy. That was a quick answer. Um, can you talk about what it was like to work with David Ebershoff as an editor, the great David Ebershoff?
One of the best.
Ebershoff.
Caring, incredibly sharp intellect, incredibly present,
Mm.
and attentive, to every single word. I would say like there's David as just who, and these aren't separate. Like who he is as a person, as an editor, they come together. And I had the privilege of being in conversation with David and knowing him, and so when it came to, um, the last sort of revisions, I was like, oh yeah, no wonder this is you're extraordinary at this. It's not I'm not the
It's
first nor the last to say it. Like this is what you've been doing for like literally, a few decades, if not more.
and it's such a high art form to be able to edit well and as sort of generously and insightfully as someone like David. It's really a gift for a writer to be paired with someone at his level, and I'm so glad that you had that relationship with him. He's a wonderful guy. The novel is I Will Greet the Sun Again by Kashiar Kabushani. Kash, thank you so much for doing this evening. It was really wonderful.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Great
Take
weekend.
care.
Yeah, stay safe out there, y'all.
Bye, everyone.